It's getting a little exhausting to hear about Kamala's crisis with men constantly when Donald Trump's crisis with women is bigger.
Once again, liberal Fox News commentator Jessica Tarlov has directly and personally triggered Donald Trump, who is once again publicly lashing out at the Fox propaganda network in a tweet directed at its CEO in which he names Tarlov specifically. It's glorious and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about here in today's video of Jessica Tarlov doing her usual shtick of fact-checking MAGA Republicans and dunking on Donald Trump. But before I get those, I want you to see that Donald Trump is once again triggered by Jessica Tarlov, again, for the third or fourth time at this point. So he says, why does Suzanne Scott of Fox News, that's the CEO, keep putting on third-rate talking heads like Jessica Tarlov, Richard Fowler, Patrick Murphy, Something Wolf, Keisha Lance Bottoms, and other radical left lunatics that lie and make up statements, with Fox rarely having any counter to their radical storytelling? Isn't it funny how he's suggesting that when Jessica Tarlov is outnumbered 4-1 on the 5, that those 4 are woefully insufficient to stop her, that she's so damn good at what she does that having Greg Gutfeld and Jesse Waters and Dana Perino and Jeanine Pirro going up against her, it's not enough to stop the mighty Jessica? Thanks for the compliment, Donald, I guess. It is so bad for winning the most important election in history of our country. Likewise, not a moment goes by when I'm not looking at negative, false ads on the other camp stuff that the other camp stuffs the Fox airwaves with. If I win, and I hope for the country's sake that I do, and this radical left moron, Kamala, doesn't get a chance to run the country, it is despite Fox, not because of them. It's so fascinating. Again, it seems like this is like the 4th rant that Donald Trump has had about Fox News in the past 7 days. And this on the heels of a brutal interview with Vice President Kamala Harris, where Brett Baier went for broke, interrupted, was disrespectful, asked pointed questions one after another. I mean, he did concede that Vice President Harris basically won the day, but it wasn't for lack of trying. What has Donald Trump so triggered, so upset? He believes that the Fox propaganda network should be a propaganda arm for him and the Republican Party. Now, they very often behave that way, but it's interesting, that sense of entitlement. Well, with that in mind, I want to play you some clips of Jessica Tarlov doing her thing, probably some of the things which triggered Donald Trump specifically. So we're going to play these clips, 2 of them from the most recent episode of The Five, and another 2 from earlier this morning in the aftermath of the interview with Vice President Kamala Harris.
Story.
We are the worst. I would also just like to say that it's getting a little exhausting to hear about Kamala's crisis with men constantly when Donald Trump's crisis with women is bigger.
Story.
That's true. Again, I love that she points this out. The Democrats do have a gender gap issue that they're struggling with, where they're losing male voters, but the Republicans are losing women voters more than the Democrats are losing male voters, and women represent a majority of the country and a more reliable voting bloc. So yes, it's a bigger problem for Republicans than Democrats, but Fox never wants to talk about it. That probably triggered Trump. Here's another clip.
There are other women at the table.
What were you offended by? Let's hear it.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you asked. I was offended by him calling himself the father of IVF and then saying that Senator Katie Britt is young and fantastically attractive, as if that's relevant at all to her concerns about her friends who have used fertility treatments in order to become pregnant. I was offended by the fact that he was asked by a voter, why is the government involved in women's basic rights? And he answered with saying, I think it's great. For 52 years, all the legal scholars, the best legal scholars, Democrats, Republicans, both of them, have wanted to get rid of it. And that's what I've done here. That is not at all how the legal scholars feel or how the American populace feels. And to the questions about lowering the prices of things, again, no real answer. I'm glad I know more about how donuts are made or whatever was going on there, but I don't think anyone walked away from that thinking that he had any sort of empathy for what's going on in women's lives all over the country. I mean, he kicked it off actually by kind of laughing at the Amber Thurman story. There was, Harris brought up that the family had put out a prebuttal, and he's laughs and he says, we're going to have higher ratings, which seems pretty cruel. You could use that moment to say, I am so sorry that that young woman, a mother of a 6-year-old boy, lost her life.
You could say that, but you'd have to be Donald Trump and give a shit about it, which he obviously doesn't. You know, it's interesting because, again, I just go back to the double standard that Fox and MAGA Republicans and Donald Trump impose on the rest of us, you know. And Vice President Harris, for example, was asked by Brett Baier in last night's very challenging interview if she owed the families of people who had been murdered by undocumented immigrants an apology. Well, by that logic, doesn't Donald Trump owe Amber Thurman's family an apology for getting Roe v. Wade overturned, which led to the passing of a trigger law, which ultimately resulted in her death? Would Fox ever even contemplate phrasing a question to Trump that way, even though it's virtually identical logic? No, of course not. Of course they'd never do that. Again, masterclass performance there by Jessica Tarlov, pointing out the various weaknesses of that Fox News town hall hosted by her co-host or her colleague, Harris Faulkner. I will also point out something Jessica won't, which is that the Fox News viewers in the audience laughed, and Harris Faulkner did as well. It was a really cruel moment that you would never see on the Democratic side. President Biden, Vice President Harris wouldn't laugh or make a joke about the grieving families of Laken Riley, for example, again, who was murdered by an undocumented migrant. But again, it just goes to show the staggering asymmetrical standards to which the two parties are held. Got some other Jessica Tarlov clips to play, though. So she was brought into America's newsroom on Fox earlier today to discuss Vice President Harris's interview with Brett Baier. And I want to play some of these clips because she makes a pretty good case. And in this first one, she offers a point of not criticism, but a tip to the vice president on how she could better answer, which she did a pretty good job yesterday, but better answer a recurring question that she gets, Vice President Harris, that is, about President Biden.
Is it? I had the sense that she's like an extremely loyal person to Biden.
Yes.
But what bad would happen to her if she said something that she would do differently than the Biden administration? I don't understand why she can't just say,
I think
here's three things.
It's all upside, the way that I see it. I think that you can so easily connect the dots from I am wildly proud of these 3 accomplishments, and this is how I'm going further. And case in point, that Medicare proposal for in-home care for aging and dying parents, it is testing off the charts.
Yeah, and it's also completely illogical.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that.
It can test off the charts.
You're trying to move voters. You're trying to show that you're different. You're trying to talk about something that people are dealing with.
Yep.
That proposal hits all of those targets. She should go to that. But what I did think about the interview was, first and foremost, showing up matters. And the Harris campaign is digging in on he is unstable, he is erratic, he is unfit, and he's hiding from the tough stuff. He's hiding from Brett Baier. But I'm going to sit down with Brett Baier, and she came off as very competent. The image that was painted of her as a cackling moron, frankly, was nowhere to be seen in that interview. She was in control of herself. She took a moment when she needed it. She said, give me a second to finish that. And I thought she came up, if there are undecideds out there, they are watching our channel, and they saw a strong person.
Again, I imagine that if Donald Trump sees what Jessica Tarlov has to say, that's going to trigger him. But she is correct. That Vice President Harris came off strong and competent. She had some rough moments. I mean, some of these questions are just by definition inherently rough, inherently challenging. But then particularly at the end, when Brett Baier tried to, sane wash Donald Trump, tried to carry water for Donald Trump, tried to gloss over what Donald Trump has repeatedly threatened to do with respect to the American people, regarding them as an enemy from within if they disagree with him. She was 100% on the mark, and she delivered an extremely viral moment in which she caught Brett Baier, red-handed in the act of disingenuously trying to cover for Trump. And that's the thing that I've seen the most viral, certainly on social media and with respect to the media's reaction. So a masterclass performance that even Brett Baier has conceded. Great performance by Jessica Tarlov per usual. I imagine she should expect another late night rant directed at her, courtesy of Donald Trump. And we'll see what happens as we get closer to the election, because it's been increasing in terms of its frequency. And I hope we don't see the end of it. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.